Jack Dempsey, known as the Manassa Mauler, remains one of the most feared figures in the history of boxing. His raw power, ferocious aggression, and unmatched fighting spirit left a lasting impact on the sport, making him a legend. But beyond the titles and victories, Dempsey's story is one of survival, desperation, and sheer willpower. Unlike many fighters who came from humble beginnings, Dempsey's journey was shaped by a unique combination of hardship and hunger, both literal and figurative. His reputation for ferocity was not just built inside the ring, but also in the brutal world of migrant boxing, where he fought for scraps, for survival, and for the dream of becoming a champion. In this video, we delve into the brutal and fascinating story of Jack Dempsey, exploring why he was so feared in his time, how he could make even the mighty Mike Tyson cry, and why his legacy as the most feared man in boxing still echoes today. Jack Dempsey was born in Manassa, Colorado in 1895, into a large Mormon family with limited means. Unlike many boxers, he didn't grow up in poverty, but his family struggled financially, and their circumstances would soon push him to make difficult decisions. As a teenager, Dempsey was driven by a need to escape the constraints of his family life. His desire for a better future and the lack of opportunities at home led him to leave his family behind with only a small inheritance to his name. Dempsey's dream of becoming a champion was fueled by the hardships he faced early on. At 16, he began his journey, leaving his family behind to pursue boxing. He traveled from town to town, looking for any opportunity to fight, no matter the stakes. Dempsey's early life wasn't about ambition, it was about survival. He would fight in mining camps, local bars, or even on moving boxcars for just enough money to keep a roof over his head and food in his belly. It wasn't uncommon for him to fight for as little as $5. Jack Dempsey's desperation led to a vicious style in the ring. He was fighting not just for a title, but for his very survival. During this time, Dempsey developed a reputation for being a wild fighter, someone who would fight anyone, anywhere, for the right price. His hunger for success wasn't just about a gold medal or a championship title. It was about overcoming the extreme poverty and uncertainty that defined his life. Dempsey's first professional fights were often fought in brutal conditions, but they were a training ground for what would come next. Each victory, no matter how small, brought him closer to his goal of becoming the best. His fights, though sometimes brief, always showed his aggression, unrelenting drive, and unyielding spirit. Jack Dempsey's journey from the streets to boxing glory was anything but typical. He didn't have the privileges of a traditional boxing gym or an established trainer. Instead, Dempsey relied on sheer determination and the lessons learned in his fights. His reputation as a rough, relentless fighter grew quickly, standing 6 feet 1 inch and weighing around 190 pounds. He wasn't the biggest fighter, but his aggression and fighting spirit made him a force to be reckoned with. He wasn't interested in boxing for the sport of it. He fought because it was the only way to make a living. By 1917, Dempsey's raw power and unrelenting style had garnered attention. His aggressive all-out fighting technique made him a feared figure, and soon he was making his mark on the professional boxing scene. The Manassa Mauler quickly ascended the ranks, earning a shot at the heavyweight title in 1919 against Jess Willard. At the time, Willard was the reigning champion, standing 6 feet 6 inches and weighing 245 pounds, a towering figure with an almost invincible reputation. The two fighters met on July 4, 1919 in Toledo, Ohio, in what would become one of the most brutal and famous heavyweight title fights in history. The fight was held under sweltering conditions, with the temperature at ringside reaching 103 degrees, but Dempsey's determination was as hot as the sun. Willard, who had won the title from Jack Johnson years earlier, was a formidable opponent, but he was no match for Dempsey's savage aggression. From the moment the bell rang, Dempsey went to work, attacking Willard with vicious combinations and relentless pressure. In the first round, Dempsey knocked Willard down 7 times, a feat that sent shockwaves through the boxing world. Despite Willard's size and apparent endurance, Dempsey's power and unrelenting will were too much. By the third round, Willard was barely able to stand, his face battered and unrecognizable. Dempsey was relentless, continuing to assault Willard until the fight was finally stopped, and Dempsey was crowned the new heavyweight champion of the world. This victory marked the beginning of Dempsey's reign, but more importantly, it showcased his unparalleled ferocity and ability to dominate opponents regardless of size. The victory over Willard was not just a title win, it was a statement that Jack Dempsey was the most dangerous man in boxing, a force of nature that could not be tamed. What set Jack Dempsey apart from other fighters wasn't just his physical strength or his impressive knockout power, it was his ruthless aggression and relentless pursuit of victory. Dempsey didn't just fight to win, he fought to destroy his opponents. His style was all about speed, power, and overwhelming force. Dempsey's approach to boxing was unlike anything the world had seen before, where many fighters would box strategically, keeping their distance and looking for the perfect opportunity to strike. Dempsey would close the gap as quickly as possible and unleash a barrage of punches. One of Dempsey's signature moves was the Dempsey roll, a devastating combination of slipping punches while moving forward and attacking with brutal hooks and uppercuts. The Dempsey roll was the epitome of his fighting style, aggressive, fast, and unrelenting. It was a tactic designed to wear down opponents, never giving them a chance to breathe or recover. Every punch Dempsey threw was thrown with intent to hurt, to finish, to dominate. He wasn't interested in point-scoring jabs or outboxing his opponents. Dempsey's mission was clear: break his opponent physically and mentally. Dempsey's style made him a nightmare for any opponent who stepped into the ring with him. His speed and agility allowed him to close the distance quickly, getting past opponents' jabs and defenses before they could react. Dempsey's attacks were always thrown with full force, and his stamina allowed him to maintain an explosive pace throughout the fight. He would wear his opponents down with constant pressure, never giving them time to think or plan. Even the most skilled boxers couldn't withstand Dempsey's aggressive onslaught for long. His ability to take punches and keep coming forward made him a terrifying presence in the ring. But it wasn't just about physical power. Dempsey's mentality was what made him so feared. He was a fighter who didn't care about the rules or the conventional strategy. He fought with an intensity that came from a deep place, perhaps driven by the hunger he had known as a child or the desperation of his early years. Whatever the reason, Dempsey fought with a singular focus that made him more dangerous than any opponent who had come before him. For Jack Dempsey, every fight was a fight for survival, and he would stop at nothing to win. This ruthless aggression made him the most feared man in boxing history. The 1919 title fight between Jack Dempsey and Jess Willard has become a defining moment in boxing history, not just for the brutal display of Dempsey's power, but for the sheer savagery and dominance he showed in the ring. Willard, at 6'6" and 245 lbs, was a giant of a man. He had earned the heavyweight title by defeating the legendary Jack Johnson in 1915, and had defended it with relative ease. But no one, including Willard, could anticipate the whirlwind of destruction that Dempsey would bring to the ring on July 4, 1919. Dempsey's strategy from the opening bell was clear. He was not going to allow Willard to have any space to breathe. The fight took place under extreme heat, with the temperature rising to 103 degrees, making the conditions even more grueling. Yet, Dempsey, who had fought in such extreme conditions before, in his earlier migrant days, thrived under pressure. His goal was simple: break Willard as quickly as possible. Within the first round, Dempsey unleashed a ferocious attack, knocking Willard down 7 times. Each time Willard struggled to rise, his face becoming more and more unrecognizable, a mask of blood and bruises. The brutality of Dempsey's assault wasn't just about the punches. It was about the sheer mental and physical punishment he was willing to inflict. When Willard was knocked down for the 7th time, Dempsey didn't retreat to his corner, as is customary. Instead, he stood over his opponent, daring him to get up. This moment in which Dempsey refused to move to a neutral corner after each knockdown was symbolic of the kind of fighter he was. A man who didn't just want to win, but to break his opponents mentally and physically. The crowd of 19,000 spectators was in a frenzy, unable to tear their eyes away from the horror unfolding in front of them. Willard, ever the champion, managed to get to his feet repeatedly, despite the relentless assault. But, in the end, the referee stopped the fight, and Jack Dempsey was crowned the new heavyweight champion of the world. Willard, though beaten beyond recognition, managed to stagger to his feet and offered Dempsey a handshake, a sign of respect from one champion to another. The fight had changed boxing forever. Dempsey had turned the heavyweight division into a brutal spectacle, and his reputation as a fighter, who was capable of terrifying violence, was cemented. This was no longer just about boxing. It was about the primal instincts of a man fighting for survival. And no one would forget the image of Dempsey standing victorious over a battered Willard. Following his title win over Jess Willard, Jack Dempsey became a household name. His devastating power and relentless aggression had made him a champion, but now he was becoming a global sensation. Dempsey's popularity was unlike anything boxing had ever seen, and he was about to change the sport forever. In 1921, Dempsey faced Georges Carpentier in what would become the first $1 million gate in boxing history. The fight was held at Boyle's 30 Acres in Jersey City, New Jersey, and attracted a crowd of 91,000 spectators. The $1 million gate was a monumental achievement, not just for Dempsey, but for the sport as a whole. It proved that boxing could be a mainstream attraction, capable of drawing massive crowds and generating enormous revenue. Dempsey's rise to fame was fueled not only by his skills in the ring, but also by his rugged, almost primal persona. The American public saw Dempsey as the epitome of the working-class hero. He wasn't just a champion. He was a man who had fought his way out of the toughest conditions. His ferocious style, combined with his humble origins, made him a symbol of American toughness, and fans across the country flocked to see him fight. The Carpentier fight itself was another demonstration of Dempsey's power. In front of a packed crowd, he knocked Carpentier out in the 2nd round, further solidifying his position as the world's most feared fighter. The fight was also broadcast on the radio, marking a new era in the accessibility of boxing. For the first time, fans across the country could tune in and listen to the fight in real time. This was a landmark moment for the sport, as radio broadcasts became a key medium for boxing's rise to the mainstream. Dempsey's popularity soared, and he was soon a national icon. He wasn't just the heavyweight champion, he was the face of boxing, and his ability to generate millions in gate revenue proved that boxing was no longer a niche sport, but a global spectacle. Dempsey's success went beyond just his fighting ability. He had captured the imagination of an entire nation. Dempsey's fame was so pervasive that he became more than just a boxer. He became a symbol of American strength and resilience. His image was plastered across newspapers, magazines, and even movies. But behind the fame, there was a man who had risen from the depths of poverty to become one of the most recognizable figures in the world. Yet despite all the wealth and accolades, Dempsey's life was still grounded in the raw, feral fighting spirit that had carried him from the streets to the championship. His popularity wasn't just about his victories, it was about his ability to inspire others through sheer force of will and to prove that with enough hunger, anyone could make it to the top. In 1923, Jack Dempsey faced a formidable opponent in Luis Firpo, the wild bull of the Pampas from Argentina. Firpo was a powerful puncher and an aggressive fighter, and his wild, swinging style made him a dangerous challenge for Dempsey. The two met in a fight that would go down as one of the most chaotic and thrilling bouts in boxing history. Firpo, standing at 6 feet 2 inches and weighing 200 pounds, was a formidable force in the ring, and many believed he could dethrone the reigning champion. Firpo's reputation as a wild brawler matched Dempsey's own aggressive style, and the fight quickly turned into a brutal contest of wills. From the opening bell, Firpo wasted no time in attacking Dempsey, throwing wild punches and forcing the champion into a defensive posture. But Dempsey, never one to back down, quickly adapted to Firpo's chaotic style. As the two exchanged powerful blows, the fight became increasingly frantic. Then, in one of the most dramatic moments in boxing history, Firpo knocked Dempsey out of the ring. The scene was surreal. Dempsey, the heavyweight champion, was sent crashing through the ropes and into the crowd. The moment of Dempsey's fall became an iconic image, with fans watching in shock as he disappeared from the ring. However, Dempsey, always the fighter, wasn't done yet, showing incredible resilience. He clawed his way back into the ring and continued the fight. The crowd was electrified by Dempsey's determination, and they watched as he fought back with a fury that could only come from a man who was used to fighting for survival. In the second round, Dempsey regained control, demanding a series of brutal punches that eventually led to Firpo's defeat. The fight ended with Dempsey knocking Firpo out, solidifying his legacy as one of the most durable and relentless champions the sport had ever seen. The Firpo fight was a testament to Dempsey's resilience and his ability to adapt under pressure. It also showcased his unrelenting aggression, even when facing an opponent who seemed tailor-made to exploit his weaknesses. For Dempsey, every fight was more than just a title defense. It was an opportunity to prove that he was the most dangerous man in boxing. The Firpo fight proved that even when Dempsey was knocked down, he would always get back up and keep fighting, a mentality that made him one of the most feared figures in the history of the sport. By 1926, Jack Dempsey's reign as the heavyweight champion seemed unchallenged. His aggressive style and brutal knockouts had earned him the reputation of a fearsome champion. But when Gene Tunney, a methodical and intelligent boxer, entered the scene, Dempsey's world would begin to shift. The first fight between Dempsey and Tunney took place in Philadelphia, and it ended in one of the most controversial moments in boxing history. The long count became the focal point of the fight, sparking debates that would rage for decades. In the 7th round, Dempsey knocked Tunney down with a powerful right hand. But in a bizarre turn of events, Dempsey failed to return to a neutral corner after the knockdown, a requirement that would have started the referee's count immediately. This allowed Tunney, who had been dazed by the punch, to regain his composure and get back to his feet before the count had even begun. The count stretched longer than the usual 10 seconds, providing Tunney with valuable extra seconds to recover. Despite Dempsey's furious attempts to finish the fight, Tunney continued to outbox him with superior footwork and technique. In the later rounds, Tunney's strategy became apparent: avoid the power punches and outmaneuver Dempsey. Tunney, though not as physically imposing as the former champion, showed superior speed, endurance, and ring intelligence. By the time the fight ended, the decision was clear. Tunney had won by unanimous decision, taking the heavyweight title from Dempsey. The long count controversy would become one of the most famous moments in boxing, with many believing that Dempsey had been robbed of a legitimate chance to reclaim his title. But for Tunney, it was a defining victory that showed a new kind of fighter could dethrone the old guard. The rematch between Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney in 1927 would become known as the long count rematch, and it proved to be a dramatic continuation of their rivalry. This time, the stakes were higher. The previous fight had been marked by controversy over the extended count, and the world was eager to see whether Dempsey could reclaim the title. The venue was Soldier Field in Chicago, and over 100,000 spectators packed into the stadium to witness this historic rematch. This was the largest crowd to ever attend a boxing event at the time, highlighting the magnitude of the event. From the opening bell, Dempsey was relentless. He came out swinging, trying to overwhelm Tunney with his brutal aggression. However, Tunney, who had studied Dempsey's tactics, stuck to the same strategy that worked so effectively in the first fight. Keeping Dempsey at bay with fast jabs, constant movement, and intelligent clinches, Dempsey's raw power was ever present. But Tunney's agility and ring craft were too much for the aging champion. In the 7th round, Dempsey landed a thunderous right hand that knocked Tunney down, once again setting the stage for another dramatic moment. Dempsey, however, failed to return to the neutral corner immediately, giving Tunney precious time to recover. Tunney rose at the count of 8, composed himself, and continued to outbox Dempsey in the following rounds. The fight was more tactical than their previous encounter, with Dempsey unable to land the knockout blow he so desperately sought. By the end of the 10th round, it was clear that Tunney's ability to avoid Dempsey's power punches and outsmart him had sealed his victory. Tunney won by unanimous decision once again, this time solidifying his place as the new heavyweight champion. Dempsey, however, was still one of the greatest figures in boxing, and despite the loss, his legacy as the most feared man in the sport remained intact. After his loss to Gene Tunney in 1927, Jack Dempsey's boxing career came to an end, marking the close of an era in the sport. Dempsey had been the embodiment of the American working-class hero. Fierce, relentless, and unyielding, his fights had captivated the nation, and his aggressive, no-holds-barred style had made him the most feared fighter in the world. Yet, after the rematch with Tunney, it became clear that Dempsey's time as champion was over. The game had changed, and the young, methodical fighters like Tunney had found a way to neutralize Dempsey's brutal aggression. However, Dempsey's retirement wasn't the end of his influence on the sport. Far from it. In his retirement, Dempsey became a key figure in the development of modern boxing techniques. He wrote Dempsey on Boxing, a book that became one of the most influential works on boxing technique in the sport's history. His teachings on footwork, body movement, and punching mechanics continue to be referenced by boxers and trainers today. Though he never fought again, his contribution to the sport was immense. Even in his later years, Dempsey's reputation as a fighter who could strike terror into the hearts of his opponents didn't fade. Stories of him in his 40s, mauling pro wrestlers, and even taking on New York muggers added to his mythos. Dempsey had never truly abandoned the beast inside him. Despite his retirement, the ferocity that defined his career remained a part of him, and it was something that would forever be remembered in the annals of boxing. Jack Dempsey, the angry, hungry, and violent fighter, left behind a legacy that transcended the ring. He was not just a champion in the sport. He was the embodiment of boxing itself, raw, unrefined, and unforgiving. Dempsey's influence on boxing continues to this day. The way he fought, the viciousness, the hunger, the primal drive set the standard for future champions. No matter who came after him, none could quite match the terror Dempsey instilled in his opponents. In the annals of boxing history, there will always be a special place for Jack Dempsey, the most feared man in boxing who could make even the great Mike Tyson cry.